In the name of the one holy and living God who desires to see each of us face to face. Amen. Please be seated. When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things they had seen. Well, eventually, Peter, James, and John must have told somebody, because we're here today, and we're listening to this story, which happens in all of the Gospels, where Peter, James, and John have had a mountaintop experience with Jesus. And in the midst of that experience, they discover a new way of seeing Jesus. And it's so powerful and so profound and so life-changing, as sometimes mountaintop experiences can be, that when they get down to the bottom, they don't quite know how to talk about it. And they probably look at each other. Did that just happen? Did you just see that? I don't know. And maybe later, much later, maybe in a moment of privacy, of confidence, of a moment of conversation between them, they begin to explore, what did we really see on that mountaintop? What really happened when Jesus looked transformed, transfigured, when he became different right before our eyes? Was he always like that and we just missed it? Was this a special appearing? Or maybe our eyes got changed and we were able to see with new lenses. But the experience must have stuck with them, because they did tell people, and those people told people. And we have this story of Peter, James, and John, and Jesus being joined by Moses and Elijah and having this moment of vision, of a clarity of sight, and of being able to talk about what is to come, a kind of exodus. Jesus' departure from Jerusalem is an exodus. Sometimes in our lives, we are dying to see things clearly. I'm sure you've said it. If I could just see clearly what's going on here. We want better sight. Sometimes in our lives, we're hoping for something to pull away the veil or reveal what's really going on. Sometimes we're really desperately wishing that someone could see us. I wish I could be seen clearly. But the way I am in the world, or the work that I'm doing, or what's happening around me, no one seems to be able to see who I really am. This desire to see and be seen, it's part of our human condition. In fact, Sebastian here was born December 24th, so he's still freshly hatched. But he's beginning to discover what it's like to see and be seen. And as his ability to notice other people, notice faces, notice that other people look at his face, his whole person transforms when he locks eyes with you. He kind of becomes radiant, like that mountaintop. He's glowing. And when he catches your eye, and you've all probably seen this with small children who are beginning to interact and discover what happens when they make eye contact, they discover they have a new power. And when they crack a smile and they watch the effect that that has on you, oh, it is so awesome. They get to watch you light up. And then it becomes this back and forth exchange, and pretty soon both of you are glowing. Moses and Elijah show up. It's a party. And it's a mountaintop experience, and all you are doing is looking into the face of a child. Pretty amazing how that happens. Children are really good at staring contests. I had one this morning at the 9 o'clock service. I lost. They're really good at it. They're able to be present in their whole selves and just meet you eye to eye with this kind of clarity and honesty and not afraid of what you might see in there. But something happens to us as we move along, as our lives grow, as we get more complicated. Sometimes, even though in our heart of hearts we really want to see and be seen, we get a little anxious. Ooh, what if somebody really saw me? Anybody ever had someone come to your door and you had to open the door and you were not ready? Not ready for prime time? When I wake up in the morning, my hair is like in all kinds of directions. I call it happy hair, but it's true. But if anybody comes to the door, I am not ready for prime time. You just get me the way I am. There's these moments where we think, oh, I hope nobody sees me. I'm not ready to be seen. And maybe there are also other parts of your life where you think, I don't really want to know what's going on there. I'm not sure I want to see more deeply what's happening. The same thing happens in our relationship with God. Sometimes we want desperately that intimacy, that connection. I want to see and know. I want God to be revealed to me. Be present in the here and now. Show yourself to me, God. And other times I think, ooh, if God showed up, I might die. You stay over there, God. I'll stay over here. A safe distance. The early Hebrew people talked about seeing God face to face might kill you. And so you had to keep a safe distance. That the power and the glory and the enormity of God was so much that it could be dangerous if you got too close to God. And yet, in the scriptures, there are stories of people, prophets or Moses, who come into this intimate relationship with God. Moses, after meeting God in the burning bush, after bringing God's people out of Egypt through the sea and into the wilderness on the way to the promised land, all the ways in which God has been present to God's people, heard their suffering, and said to them, I am bringing you to a land flowing with milk and honey. Trust me. I love you. We are going to get through this together. And they get into the wilderness, and Moses says, God is up on top of the mountain, and we can go talk to God, so why don't we go? And the people look at Moses, and they say, I'm a little busy, and I don't really want to go up on top of that mountain. But you, Moses, you go right ahead. You just tell us what God said. When you come down, bring a few tablets. Let us know what's going on with God. But if we go up there, we might die. They can see the top of the mountain. They can see the opportunity to come face to face with God, but it is too much. They don't really want to be seen. And they don't really want to see God. And sometimes our lives are like that. We're afraid. We're unsure what will happen if all of the masks and the filters and the makeup and the buffers that we put on were quickly removed. And God pushed our doorbell when we weren't prepared. And we were revealed. Would we be shining like the sun? Or would we be looking for a rock to hide under? So Moses goes up to the top of the mountain, has this incredible experience, meeting God face to face, and Moses is not killed. That should be a little lesson to all of us. Even though we're afraid, we could probably withstand it. And when Moses comes back down, the people can see that he's changed. He's not the same person who went up that mountain. When he comes back down, his face is shining. He's full of the experience of meeting God face to face. And I have a hunch that what happens to us is like what happens when we look into the faces of babies. We become less self-conscious. We become more ourselves. We find a way that all of those masks and facades and filters kind of fall off, and we discover unconditional love. And it feels great. And it changes us. And we're different when we come down off the mountain. And hopefully other people can see it. But sometimes it's scary. Have you ever met someone who was just completely unconditionally present and loving to you and you weren't ready for that? Sometimes it's a little scary. Sometimes we would rather, here, could you just put this on and get a little distance from me? Because I'm not ready to be that close. I'm not ready to close that gap. And so in our lives as human beings, searching for intimacy and closeness and also terrified about how it is going to change us, we have to practice back and forth, opportunities to let ourselves be known and loved, to know another and love them, and then we come down off the mountain and we get covered up again a little bit. Peter, James, and John don't tell anyone, and they probably hope they can rub the experience off a little bit so that they can go back to their regularly scheduled lives. But they keep remembering what it was like. They keep remembering how incredibly transformative it was to be in that intimate presence of God and to discover themselves beloved, complete, and whole. I think that's what's going on in that little one moment where Peter says, "Oh, by the way, Jesus, it's good we're here. We could build some booths, some places for everybody to live," because I think Peter was getting anxious. Too much eye contact. Have you ever made extensive eye contact with another human being, not a kid? Because I tell you, staring contests, they're good at that. And they're allowed. But eye contact with another human being, an adult, for more than like a few seconds. We have manners about this. They're kind of unspoken, but when someone makes too much eye contact, you're kind of like, excuse me. I have a challenge for you this week. Take 60 seconds with someone you already trust, not a stranger, although you can do it with a stranger. Someone you trust and love, take 60 seconds and just stare at each other. Don't talk. Don't put on any filters. Don't fill up that space between you with expectations or rocks to hide under or the ways in which we create a safe distance. Just take 60 seconds to look into the face of someone else and just love them. Just let yourself be open to the gift of them. Maybe on their face, which is often the map of the journey we have been on, maybe on their face they have a scar, and you know right where that came from. Maybe there's some wrinkles, probably know where those came from too. Some gray hairs, some experiences that have left a mark. Or maybe there's that favorite dimple that you have always loved. Or maybe there's that twinkle in their eye that you notice. Take 60 seconds and just look into their face. It'll be vulnerable. It might be a little scary. But I believe this is how we begin to be transfigured, transformed. How we begin to glow with that love that Peter, James, and John, and Jesus, and Moses, and Elijah found on the mountaintop. This experience of meeting God face to face, and we do it often when we meet each other. Now, I'm not saying that each and every one of us is God, but I am saying that that hunger and longing and yearning to be wholly present, to be known and loved, to be in communion with another being, it is born in us. We come this way. It's what drives us into these relationships of love and trust that allow us to bond when we're little babies and that teach us how to keep coming back to love over and over again as adults. Because every time we mess up and bonk our heads and get a scar or develop a wrinkle or discover a way in which it is difficult, we meet each other again face to face. On that mountaintop, we see each other as we really are. And in those moments, we come to know love. We choose it. Reverend Jess talked about love last week, not as a feeling or forgiveness as a feeling, but something that we choose to do. And when we spend, if you're really ambitious, try 120 seconds. When we spend some time face to face in that silence and in that naked presence with another human being, we have a choice to love them. Not because of what we say, or we buy them a card, or we hand them some flowers. That's the stuff that we exchange in between. But to be whole and present, beaming, shining with that love, we become transformed and transfigured. And we come to know them and ourselves in a whole new way. And this is also what God is longing for with us. As much as we want to see God, have God be revealed, discover in the face of Christ the incarnate presence of God's love, God also wants to see us, wants us to be revealed, wants us to be willing to remove out of the way all of that stuff that we put up as a protective barrier, and to just be present. And when we do it, it changes us. We discover more deeply who we are, and we discover more deeply who God is. So on this feast of the Transfiguration, I know we can't stay here forever and ever. If we had to look each other in the face 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it would be overwhelming. Or they would call your psychiatrist and say, something is not right here. This person is missing a little detachment. But we have a holy yearning to love one another and to be loved, to love God and to be loved. And we practice that, overcoming our own fears, overcoming the ways in which we would rather hide, when we take time to be really 100% present to each other. And so I promise you, as we are on this hinge point, about to enter into the season of Lent, about to journey towards Jerusalem and the cross with Jesus, moving our way towards that exodus, that freedom into resurrection, practice being known. Practice knowing others. Take time, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, to just look into the face of another human being and let yourself be seen. I promise, if you try it, you will shine. Amen.